Good morning again, guys. Just wanted to touch on a few things from yesterday's video as well that I'm not sure I made clear or touched upon. Two things that happened in that study that I think are relevant or worth considering. One was that those training improvements and throwing velocity improvements happened in both groups in season. So those 8 weeks were during games, during their in season schedule. So it just touches upon the importance of not only maintaining your strength gains and your gains from the off season, but also that you should be training in season because you can still be making improvements. And if you're not training during that time, then you're losing a large portion of your window of opportunity to make improvements. So keep training in season. You can make improvements. Um, and another thing was, even though they improved throwing velocity in that study and strength, they did lose a little bit of range of motion in the shoulder. It wasn't very, very significant, but they did lose a little bit of their shoulder mobility. And two reasons I think it's important to touch upon that. One, people usually think if you lose range of motion, you're going to instantly lose your performance or your gains. And that wasn't the case. You can improve your strength and your velocity while not necessarily improving your range of motion. In fact, in that study, they actually lost a little bit. I'm not saying that you should focus on losing mobility or never stretching, but it was one interesting thing in the study that was mentioned. So today's study is out of the University of Virginia. They looked at 12 Division I softball players from the University of Virginia. And what they found was after 12 weeks of training, they split up these athletes into open kinetic chain and closed kinetic chain activities. So open kinetic chain, think of the leg press or any activity where your distal body part, your hands or your legs are moving. So the leg press, it's a leg strengthening exercise, but your legs are moving. That's an open kinetic chain activity, whereas the squat or the push-up is a closed kinetic chain activity. Your hands or your feet in both of those activities are not moving, whereas this study considered the bench press open kinetic chain, so their hands were moving even though they're strengthening their upper body. So what this study found was that the closed kinetic chain group over the course of 12 weeks, training 3 times a week, made significant improvements in throwing velocity, which were greater than the open kinetic chain group. So training with the closed kinetic chain exercises were superior to training with open kinetic chain exercises alone. Good training is going to incorporate both. But if you were only picking one, obviously it shows the focus of your training should be closed kinetic chain activities. In this particular study, their closed kinetic chain relied heavily on suspension training. So think of the TRX. The TRX is one of the most common suspension trainers, and in that you're grabbing the handles. So your hands aren't really moving too much other than a little bit of stability. You're really moving other proximal segments. So that was just something interesting that was in the research. Once again, the closed kinetic chain was more superior or was superior to the open kinetic chain. And that's kind of in line with other research stuff that has found that when looking at the vertical jump, the back squat, 1RM back squat, so basically a heavy squat was more related to vertical jump performance, which is jumping up high as you can straight from the ground, than the leg press. So they took people, basically had them leg press as much as they could, and they had people squat as much as they could, and they found the closed kinetic chain squat was more related to vertical jump performance. And one of the reasons why vertical jump performance is so important is because if you look at any sort of athletic activity, throwing, hitting, any sort of speed movement, the vertical jump is one of the most correlated or athletic movements that we or that has been studied. So once again, just touching on the study from today, softball players over 12 weeks, training 3 times a week, were able to significantly improve their throwing velocity through training, and it was 2 miles per hour using mostly closed kinetic chain exercises such as TRX activities like push ups and lat pull downs, things like that. And I'm just going to post a couple of the exercises up top here or while the video is going on so you can get an idea of what those were. And if you have any more questions on those, then I'd be happy to demo some of those. And tomorrow's video is actually going to be on specific push up variations and how to maximize which variation you're doing for what your goals are or areas to improve. Thanks for listening again, and you can follow me on Smart Rehab on Instagram, Smart Rehab 1 on Twitter. Please subscribe if you enjoyed these videos.